Pokémon Legends is back with evolved mechanics that hooked me in a way that I haven't felt in a long time. Let's dive right in. Here is my review of Pokémon Legends ZA for Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 Edition. The plot of ZA takes place in Lumio City of the Kalos region about 5 years after the events of Pokémon X and Y. You arrive for vacation, are recruited into a Royale tournament taking place at night, and thrust into a problem with Mega Pokémon appearing that threaten the residents. Now, as a story, it's pretty good on its own, at least in the first half, but this game is more or less a sequel to Pokémon X and Y. The first half is standalone, with many characters coming in as cameos from those games that you aren't straight up told who they are. More of an if you know situation. But the further you go, the more apparent it is that this is a follow-up to X and Y's storyline. I also found it interesting that some timeline placement bits were put into little references made by the NPCs, connecting this game not only to X and Y, but also Legends Arceus and Sword and Shield. With gameplay, this is a sort of turn-based but not really RPG with exploration and sandbox elements. As you play, you'll explore a large city, doing quests and fighting in fast-paced Pokémon battles. Because this is a Legends game, its gameplay is an evolved version of what we saw in Legends Arceus. Pokemon encounters take place wherever you are instead of a separate arena. You can wander around and throw Pokeballs manually. The large size alphas return and a bunch of quality of life things, like swapping out Pokemon moves whenever you want and evolving them manually. Though I was sad that the evolution items like Link Cable did not return from Arceus. Since this game does have online multiplayer, you can use that for trade evolutions. The biggest two changes are the environment and combat itself. ZA takes place in a sandbox style version of Lumio City. No base of operations or going to different environments. You run around the city, go into segmented areas where Pokemon roam around to be fought and caught, and there are loads of shops, Pokemon centers, and other fast travel points around. It's not large enough for me to really call it open world. It feels more akin to sandbox games like the old GTA city-based maps. Though the game does also have Rooftop Exploration, where you frequently use ladders, teleporters, and construction to get on top of buildings where you can find Pokemon not available elsewhere like Larvitar or Eevee. But the combat is the biggest thing I found enthralling. I would argue this game is no longer turn-based at all. You and your Pokemon move around in real time, and when you issue commands, they're on a cooldown. The Pokemon moves to a designated spot and launches that attack. PP is no longer a thing. Any move can be used infinitely, but all of them have been reworked for this new action-based system. Not very effective moves have basically been turned into damage being completely nullified, Psychic now doing no damage to dark types, and many skills do different things, like Fire Spin or Whirlpool, creating a perpetual circle of damage that will hit anything that walks into it. It feels so different with all of the skills having cooldowns that you have to wait for, helping to encourage you to use stat-changing moves. While waiting for Psychic to recharge on Gardevoir, you might as well just use Calm Mind to boost your stats since you're waiting anyways. It's also much more difficult with wild encounters. Legend Arceus had Pokemon attacking you on occasion when you didn't have anyone fighting them. In this game, you are the main target in nearly every encounter that isn't a trainer battle. You throw out an absurdly huge Alpha Tyranitar and the enemy doesn't even care. They're out for the player and will chase you down, attacking only you until you hit them with your Pokemon enough times for them to become distracted. I was surprised at just how aggressive the Pokemon are in this game. If you're not constantly dodging around and picking your battles, you can easily walk into a new wild zone and immediately black out with a full team of healthy Pokemon. The Arceus-like boss fights also return with Rogue Mega Evolution. Across the story, you have to fight a bunch of giant-sized megas in small arenas. It looks similar to raids from previous games, but it's less restrictive and not built for multiplayer. You fight against a mega until they drop enough mega energy for you to mega evolve to be strong enough to tackle the threat. It's still somewhat similar to the Arceus bosses in that they are mostly focused on you and have set attacks for you to predict and dodge around, but it feels more like a fight than a minigame. I fell in love with two things about this game. The combat I found to be so engaging and fun, and there's so much to do. Every once in a while in the story, you'll get more wild zones to explore for new Pokemon, along with a plethora of side quests you do for the NPCs. The side missions have little stories with them, but they're getting you items and Pokemon you don't get elsewhere until the late game. Doing these missions will net you early access to the Kalos starters, Riolu, and some of the game's services, like the Furfo trim styles and lots of hairstyles and colors for the player character. I loved doing the side quests, and when you catch everything in a wild zone, everything in it will then be able to spawn as alphas. I just got lost in the loop of getting side missions done, roaming the wild zones, looking for new alphas, so much that I would almost forget the game's biggest gimmick, the ZA Royale. The game has a day-night cycle, and at night, battle zones will appear where you can wander and take on trainers to get points towards ranking up in the Royale itself. Lots of these ranks are story required, but the real-time element goes into this as well. You get little cards as you wander around the zones, giving you extra points not only for doing battles, but sneaking up on opponents and one-shotting their first Pokemon before they even know you're there, giving yourself a big advantage. Now don't get me wrong, the Royale is fun to do and the best way of making money early on. I just got sidetracked so easily with the plethora of side missions and hunting for alphas that I often only dove into it when the story told me to. If I had one nitpick to make about this game, I would say it's the day-night cycle itself. It's rather short before you get to the post-game, and while the day-night cycle will wait for you to finish a trainer battle before swapping over, it will not wait for you to do a wild encounter. I've had countless alpha battles interrupted mid-fight, and when it reloaded the next day, the alpha was gone. It would have been nice if the cycle paused if you were in any sort of combat, not just trainer battles. Speaking of content, let's go into that, because I spent a long time with this game. I haven't gotten this hooked on a game in a very long time, not wanting to put it down and doing almost every single side quest the game threw at me. Even when the post game happened and I had a bunch of story stuff to do, I just sat in the newest wild zone watching alphas and catching them for almost 5 hours before I was okay doing what actually needed to be done. But to be specific, it took me around 42 hours to get through the game and unlock the post game, where the Battle Royale expands, you get extra fights for the legendaries, and the typical hyper training and bottle cap hunt. If you don't go into the side quests that much, you could probably clear the game in around 35 hours. Moving on to presentation, the game looks pretty good. The visual style is somewhat similar to Scarlet and Violet, with the models having their weird little textures, as you can see here with the scales all over Tyranitar. Now, if you're playing on Switch 1, you will see jagged edges around a lot of the building models, especially if you're wandering around the main parts of the city during the day. But it looks decent overall, while on Switch 2, all of those edges are smoothed out and it basically looks perfect. With performance, it is wildly different between platforms. If you're playing on Switch 1, the game targets 30 FPS, but it's decently choppy throughout. It does its best to stay at 30 as much as possible, but you will get frequent dips into the 20s whether you're exploring the city or fighting in a battle. It's playable enough, but not a super smooth experience. But moving to Switch 2 edition, it's a smooth 60 frames per second. It felt incredible from the moment I first booted the game up and walked into the city. It isn't always a perfect 60, as there will be tiny hiccups from time to time when moving the camera, and you get a little stutter going through the Pokemon Center healing animation. But those stutters are few and far between. Overall, it's a fantastic 60 FPS experience. That brings us to battery life, which isn't a whole lot no matter what you're playing on. Legend ZA gives the original and light models a battery range of about 2 to 3 hours. The V2 and OLED models only get 4 to 5 hours, and the Switch 2 edition gets around 2 hours and 30 minutes. In conclusion, the Legends formula comes back in a smaller scale sequel to Pokemon X and Y, but with even more of the real-time and action elements of Legends Arceus, from catching and fighting to manual evolution and alphas. Now, the downside, the day-night cycle can often interrupt you mid-battle, but if you enjoy the Arceus formula and have a Switch 2, it's a beautiful 60 FPS game on that platform with a ton for you to keep busy with. Reviews to Go rates Pokemon Legends ZA a 9 out of 10. If you're interested in more Pokemon content, check out my Scarlet and Violet review from a couple years ago. And if you enjoy this content, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.